How do we raise empowered children in this world? How do we impart self-trust, individuation, attunement, confidence, and the permission to dream into this next generation that is our future? Hey, we're back. It's Chani, and I am here with Rivky Gross. Let's get into it.
Let's get into it. Hi, Chani.
Hey! Wow, this is definitely something I am super passionate about. I'm so excited that this is what's on the forefront for us and what we get to talk about today. I feel like it might end up being a few episodes because there's just so much to unpack here.
Yeah, the possibility in raising empowered children is a really exciting topic for me as well. And I really believe that with the right tools, it's possible. And this podcast, The Possibility in the Universe, is us bringing some possibilities to our audience so that they can really feel into the possibilities for themselves. And I really want to start this conversation by talking about a question that my friend asked me recently. I think it was 2 weeks ago. She called me up and she said, my husband and I are really struggling with shame in our parenting. Can we talk about it? And I said, yeah, what's up? What's going on? And she said, every time I go onto either social media or I read some kind of publication or book or listen to parenting experts, I start to get swallowed by shame of all the things that I didn't do and all the things that I don't always do and the things that I forget to do. And she said, I definitely do not want to raise my children in exactly the way that I was raised, even though I understand that my parents did what they did when they knew what they knew. But I don't want to necessarily raise my children in that way. And what can I do?
Mm-hmm.
And I shared with her that in my very first training as a developmental therapist, I learned research from, I think his name is Dr. David Winnicott, says that good enough parents get it right. And if you're watching this video, you'll see me doing quotations 30% of the time. And whenever I share this with parents, they're like, whoa, 30% of the time? What's the other 70% of the time? And before I share what the other 70% of the time is, I want to break down what a good enough parent is.
Yeah.
A good enough parent is the best parent there is because there's no such thing as perfection. And getting it right in this case, and there's quotations because parenting and as is life is beyond right and wrong, is helping to create, in this case, secure attachment with our children. And what does a parent who's good enough, which is the best parent there is, do the other 70% of the time? The other 70% of the time, they repair. So in order to create secure attachment with our children, we need to attune to our children. We can attune to our children, and most relationships, 30% of the time, we're picking up what they're putting down. But in the other 70% of the time, we're desiring to pick up what they put down and we're course correcting over and over. So a very simple example would be something like my child saying, I want this, I want this. And you say, you want the chicken? And then you realize, oh, you want the pizza. And you give them the pizza. That's a tiny micro example of what a attunement lapse and then understanding what an attunement moment would look like. And that's obviously a very micro example, but it gets larger and larger as children get older and also as we understand attunement more and more deeply.
Wow, yeah, I am actually, what's coming up in my body right now is a little bit more of a heightened experience of that. There was this moment where my daughter Eliora had a book fear, and I had put an alarm in my phone so that I don't forget to go, but the alarm did not go off because I had accidentally put it for a different date, and I did not go to her book fair. And she came home really distraught and hurt by the fact that I didn't come. That's really hard when you made it clear that you want your mother to be there. She told you she will, and then she didn't show up. And she came home and she was really sad and upset. And I saw that, but I also recognized that. And I said to her, I'm so sorry that I wasn't there. You know, I made my alarm on my phone and it didn't work. And she's like, I hear that. I hear that. I'm not blaming you for the mistake, but like, can you stay with me in what's uncomfortable for me here? And what she offered me was attunement. Her offering was for me to attune to what she was asking for, which I realized in myself I could not even be attuned to. There was a part of me that wanted to bypass her feelings to be justified in what happened, which is a human mistake that I put the alarm in my phone wrong. And so I missed it. And she's like, I hear that you made a mistake. That's not the point here. The point
Mm.
is, I'm asking you to attune to the feeling that I'm having here, which is the feeling of hurt, the feeling of possibly being forgotten or not prioritized or whatever that feeling was. And when she offered me that reflection, I was like, yes, I can be here with you. I'm so
Mm.
sorry. And I sense how hurt that feeling is. And what it also offered me was going into the experience with her. I wonder what it felt like when all the mothers came and you looked around the room and you couldn't find me. I
Mm.
wonder what the feeling was like for you. I wonder what it was like when others were being praised by their mothers for their presentation and you did not have someone there to hold you and to see you and what you worked so hard on. And so her beautiful attunement to herself and her willingness to not overlook that. Maybe in your life experience that was bypassed by your parents, but I'm not willing to do that for me. I want to stay here because this is what's alive in me. And she offered me a slowing down in myself and a recognizing that's the way that I was. I spiritually
Yeah.
bypassed. That's part of my coping mechanism. But her attunement and her advocacy for her own self, the need that she had inside of herself really helped me slow down and be with her
I,
in that.
yeah. Wow. It's such a beautiful story, and I'm learning a few things from it. One is your parenting style creates space for an empowered child to actually speak to a parent, which is you in this case, in a way in which she can be heard. She can make a bid for attunement, even though there was a part that of you that had difficulty attuning to yourself because of maybe some kind of shame or guilt. And then she can, and then she knows somewhere deep inside of her that you will course correct, that you will reattune, that you will repair. So the empowered child, the basis of an empowered child is available here. And the
Yeah.
foundation of an empowered child is available here. And the other thing that I'm really hearing from this story is something that I want to share with our audience as well, which is, what is attunement? Attunement is the experience of tuning into the inside parts. So there's a story that's happening, right? And then there's an experience that's going on. And many people grow up, especially in older generations, with fully experiencing the story of life and very little modeling or mirroring of an internal experience, right? And if we talk to young mothers of an older generation, I just had to get by, right? I was giving my kids a bath and making dinner and going to work and going to sleep, right? But what was going on for you on the inside the whole time? And what might have been going on for your children on the inside at the whole time? And raising empowered children is the experience of understanding that each child is a whole world with an entire gamut of emotions and a whole inner experience. And I spoke to a mother recently, a client that I was working with. She said it took her 8 years until she realized that her child actually had her own life, her own experience, her own dreams, her own thoughts, because that's not the way that she was raised. She wasn't attuned to as being like a real person with real inner experience. So, articulating this, I think, is really, really important. And Eliora is such an embodiment of tuning back into what's actually going on the inside as opposed to what's happening in the story realm. And I think that part of empowerment is modeling attunement to ourselves and attuning to our children so that they can learn to attune to themselves as well. Because an attuned person, a tuned in, a tapped in person is an empowered person, because when I know myself and when I know that I can be seen and heard and known, then I have so much more power and agency in my life to then go after my dreams and my creativity and create my own life.
Yeah, it's so epic.
Right?
Yeah. And I think that part of what is also present here is understanding that our children know so much. I think that
Mm,
in older paradigms, it was like the adult knows, the children don't. I will tell you because I said so. This is it. There's no space for discussion and no consideration for like how that lands in you. I said, you do, done.
yeah.
But I think that in my experience in parenting and having such awesome kids is that they are my deepest teachers. They are the ones that mirror back to me the parts in myself that are hard to be with, the parts of myself that I want to bypass, the parts of myself that I'm ashamed of or is too vulnerable to stand in. And they have taught me that lesson time and again by
Mm,
advocating for what they know to be true for themselves. And I'm willing to listen to them. I think that's part of it. It's like recognizing that just because I'm older doesn't necessarily mean that I'm wiser,
yeah.
because each child is wise for themselves. They know, they intuit their own understanding of things. And if I could really listen to them, if I can really consider the words that you're saying and really unenmesh from my own experience of it and really listen to what their experience of it, then I can honor what's here for them. And that's how I can be attuned. That's how I can be in that experience with them.
So resonant and so real. And people don't get older developmentally just because they get older physically. People
Absolutely.
get older because they work on themselves. People get older when they expand their consciousness. People get older when they work on their humility and understanding what they don't know. And I think
Yes.
one of the most, something so important not to tell a child is you'll know when you get older. You'll know when, because
Mm-hmm.
that kind of statement is not necessarily true.
Yes.
You'll know, first of all, I trust that because you know yourself and this is your experience. Trust begets trust. When I trust myself, or when I trust my child's instinct, that's how my child learns to trust their own instinct. That's how your child learns to trust their own instinct. When we do not trust ourselves, then we do not trust our children, then they do not learn to trust themselves. And trust is the bedrock of empowerment, because
Yes.
self trust is not only about when I believe something and then I do it and then it comes out the way that I thought. Self trust is also holding myself and being with myself when I trusted something that maybe didn't happen. And I still trusted that was meant to be. I still trusted that I was supposed to do that. I still trusted that's my child's journey. And something else that you shared about enmeshment is also making me really excited and alive and passionate is that each child, each soul, each neshama has their own journey. And something that I learned from you and inspires me greatly about you, Chani, is your ability to allow your children their own souls, because you know so deeply that your children are on their own soul's journey. And your children are not an extension of you or a reflection of you, or you don't own them.
Yes.
And nobody owns anybody, even their own children. It's not an ownership, Because when we feel like we own, when we feel like it's a reflection, when we feel like it's an extension, then that's when it comes in where we're like, oh, you can't do this because it's a reflection of me. Or if you act like this, then it will embarrass me. Or my self-judgment then gets projected onto you. Or my unmet childhood needs or my unmet childhood dreams then become your problem, or I need to react to that in some way. No. And there's such a strong boundary inside of me in that space. And I see that it is possible, Chani, because you are the possibility in the
Mm.
universe for this specific topic. You really allow your children the gift of being their own soul. And you have such a deep knowing and faith in God that they pass through you and that you raise them. And it is your duty and your privilege and your gift and your opportunity, but they aren't you, they are them. And when we give our children that trust in their soul's journey, what happens is their soul is free to fly. And not everyone's journey looks the same.
No. Wow. Whoa. Thank you. And thank you for seeing me. And I also want to give so much credit to my parents, because I think that being an empowered parent and being an empowered child myself came from my empowered parents, who found it inside of themselves in whatever way that they did. But it's making me think of this time when my dad invited me to a Friday night walk one winter. And I had never been invited to a Friday night walk before, so I knew that this was going to be interesting. And I must have been somewhere between 12 and 13 years old. And I was definitely starting to feel into myself as a girl. And I had lots of brothers and brothers' friends and neighbors that were boys. And like, I was curious and I wanted to be a part of it. And I wanted to play basketball and get physical and like, be in the like tension of that energy, which excited me. And I also love the feeling of being pursued and curious. And like all of those things are very alive for me, especially when I was so young. And my dad was obviously noticing. And so he took me on a walk and he was like, listen, I'm going to talk to you right now because I'm your dad and this is my job as your father. Okay. And with that very clear understanding of where this was coming from, he gave me insight into young boys and their intentions and all the different things that may come up in that space. And then he also told me that he also expressed his fears. I'm your dad and I need to give you this information. I'm also afraid for you. I also don't want you to get hurt. I don't want you to put out in a way that you're going to regret. I don't want you to be upset with yourself without the boundaries that are possible for you. And so he made it clear that this was his fears. His fears as my dad, and his job as my dad was to express this to me. And then the bottom line at the end of the conversation, which is what empowered me to no end, was, and Chani, you're a big girl and you're going to do whatever you want. Because the bottom line is, I will not be there when you make your choice. I will not be there to save you from the fear that I have inside of me. You are going to be the one to make the choice, and you will be the one to be on the receiving end of whatever that consequence is. And so having that experience with my dad, where there was such a clear distinction of what was his, what was mine, and the empowerment of understanding that I am an individual on my own soul's journey that will be the one to take responsibility for the choices that I make, because they are my choices. And he made it very clear, I cannot control that. I am aware of that. But if I give you the information, then whenever you come to the decision, you will have the information that you need and you can make an educated choice. And that is what he imparted for me. And there's been times in my life where I called him to remind him of this, and he didn't even fully remember it. He's like, I don't even remember it. Whatever. I just intuited whatever felt like was the right thing in the moment. I don't even know. But for me, it was such an empowering way to and the attunement to understanding that being the person that I am, which was rebellious and curious and adventurous and all those things, I needed my freedom. You're not going to tell me, don't do this because it's bad and that's the end of it. He knew that.
Yeah.
The attunement was there, the attunement to understanding that to get through to my daughter, I need to speak to her in the way that she will receive it and feel empowered to make the choices that are best for her. And I definitely made great choices and I had amazing consequences from that. And I've also made really crappy choices. And I sat with what that had to offer me and teach me because I took the responsibility for the choice that I made because it was
Yes.
given to me. And
Yeah.
so if I made the choice and I was in the power seat of the choice, now I get to eat what it is giving me,
Yeah.
which
It,
sometimes was great and sometimes was like really crappy. But there was so much I'm just trying to find the word like, yeah,
agency.
empowerment, agency and
Agency.
empowerment over I made the choice and I get to be with the consequences of this choice, whatever that is. But I felt empowered by it, not victimized or belittled or helpless in the experience.
Yeah. A few things that I'm learning from the story. Shout out to your dad, first of
Yes. Shout out
all.
to my
Shout out
dad.
to your dad. But
Yes.
there's a few things that I'm learning from the story, which is your dad attuned to himself.
Hmm.
He checked in his inner experience. He shared that with you. He also understood and honored your agency, your autonomy, and he honored his faith in God, which is that he isn't in control. I
Yes.
think the control factor for so many, and I've seen a lot of parents over the years, the past few years, that the control factor of things is the illusion, the
Literally.
illusion, that's the word, that I have control. Because what that causes is anxiety. What that causes is a push pull. What that causes is tremendous ruptures that can't always be repaired. What that causes is a lot of pushing of ego as opposed to heart.
Mm.
Because what is ego in the definition, in the way that I would define it, it's fear, right? So it's fear based parenting, which many people listening might still be in that paradigm of fear based living because so many are. And I think that just holding compassion for desiring to be the possibility in the universe in a world that many people are afraid, just presencing that, not doing anything about it, but just presencing that for a moment. And I might want to do that for my child, but then I go to a school in which the paradigm is fear based, or vice versa. A school might want to shift that for their students, but then the parent body is that way. So just understanding these are the kinds of things that people come and speak about in my office. And I spoke to a principal, I think it was last year or so, and she said, I would love to create a more heart centered, more trusting school. I would love to create a school in which students really have a lot more autonomy and a lot more agency. But if this is not across the board, then my school is just going to become a free for all,
Mm.
because instead of the children learning agency, they're just going to feel like, oh, they can just come here in order to be free from whatever constriction they might be having at home, as opposed to the entire paradigm shifting to trusting, right? Because if one part of the system isn't necessarily on board, then the child's going to have a reaction
Yes.
to, as opposed to entering into a new paradigm where they're more free. And self again, self trust comes from being trusted, comes from trusting ourselves. And how do parents learn to trust themselves? By first understanding why they might not have, which
Hmm.
is because maybe they weren't trusted, or maybe their parents were anxious, or things like that, and grieving that, and maybe just noticing that and bringing that into consciousness and awareness. And then trusting and practicing trusting the universe, trusting God, because it's really the same thing, right? We give up, we loosen our grip, we loosen our attachment, we loosen our tight hold when we understand that we're on our soul's journey, our child's on our soul's journey, the creator has a master plan, and we allow more. Allow as opposed to contract.
Yeah.
allow and expand as opposed to contract. Your child's going to flow. Your child's going to go. Your child's going to move. God willing, they will. And the more you hold tight, the more you create the possibility of a push pull and a controlling fear based environment. And something that your dad did as well, which was that he was also responsible. He wasn't all, in that letting go agency, autonomous place. He also took his responsibility and due diligence as a father, and he shared with you what he knew when he knew it as he knew it. And
Absolutely.
and that is also attunement, because it isn't only one thing. This is a very nuanced topic about raising empowered children, because it's the attuning plus the agency. It's the attuning plus honoring the individuality. It's knowing that my child knows himself best and that there's certain things I know better as an adult. It's both and both.
And it also feels like it's owning your fears and not projecting them onto your children. I think that the boundary and the distinction of understanding that these are my fears I have as your father, as a father of his oldest daughter, these are my fears. It doesn't mean that my fears are going to come to fruition, but they are the fears that I walk with, which is why I want to give you the information that I have. And I think that even before we fully get to understand what it is that it takes to trust, it's, can I make space for my fears?
Yeah.
Can I get curious about what I'm afraid of? Because, and when I get curious about that, I could really make the distinction of whose fear is this? It's
Yeah.
my fear. And it's okay. First of all, it's okay to be afraid. That's a very just like normal human thing. But when
Yeah.
I recognize whose fear it is, which is my own, I then can take authority of that and not project it onto you and make that become the fear that you have.
Yeah.
I remember when I was a kid, I was 12 years old and I wanted to take the public transportation to go somewhere in the city or something like that. It was my first ever, I wanted to go on this adventure. And my mother agreed. And no other mother in the entire grade was like willing to do that. You have to understand that when I was 12 years old, there was no cell phone. You're going on public transportation. I have no idea where you're going, if you got there, if you got to where you thought you're going to go, that you're going to find the train back, that you're going to make it back home. I have zero and I have no way to contact you the whole time. There's no way. There's like a surrender that is really big and really beyond. Anyways, there was one other friend, Miriam Telashevsky, and she was like, great, you guys can go. And we had the best experience. We felt independent. We had the best time. We went out for pizza. We bought like little things in the store. We were just so busy. And we had the best time. Later on in my life, my mother told me, she's like, in my life, what I've learned is that if my children trust themselves, then I trust that they can do it, because nobody wants to do something if they don't believe that they can.
Mm.
That was her theory. And so when I came to her at 12 years old and I said, I want to take public transportation and I want to go somewhere, she trusted in my ability, because she knew that if I have this desire, that means that somewhere inside of me, I trust myself that I can.
Yeah.
And so she chose to support all of us children in the things that we came up, that we brought to the forefront, because she's like, there is no way that a child will want to do something if they think they're going to fail at doing it.
Yeah.
It's not real. They're only going to want to do it if they have a very sure sense within them that they can. And so she trusted that. She trusted in our trust in ourselves, which
Yeah.
allowed for that possibility to happen, and for the autonomy and the adventure and all the things that it nurtured for me, because I needed that and I wanted
Yeah.
that. And it wasn't like, you're going to probably get lost on the train. I don't think it's a good idea. Well, how are you going to find your way home? What's going to be, which might have been all of her fears.
Yeah.
But she chose not to bring that forward, because if you know my mom, I love her so much, but she loves to worry about everything. That's just her
Yeah.
nature. So it really was making that distinction of what is alive for my child, what is alive for me. How do I separate those two so that I can support the trust that my child is showing me in themselves, and honor that and not project the fear that I might have onto them? I'll tell you also, this summer we went hiking, and I went with Matan and Itai, and we went to this like massive waterfall upstate New York. And we got to the waterfall, and Matan went to the edge of this cliff that was straight down, was right alongside the waterfall. My heart was in my, it left my body actually. I couldn't actually. I was in my own fear and in my desire to protect and save and all the things that come up for me. I was like, ah, so afraid. Not only that, he's standing on the edge of this cliff, and he's swinging his body, just chucking rocks. And I realized that he is not afraid. He is not afraid of heights. If he was afraid, he would not be standing at the edge. If he didn't trust himself in whatever way that he does right now, he wouldn't be standing there. And I chose to walk away because when I was looking at it, my anxiety was rising. And I was like, oh my God, he's so close to the edge. Oh my God, he's going to fall. I'm so scared. What's going to happen? And I was like, he's not experiencing that. I'm watching him, and he is free, and he is loving it, and he is not afraid, and he's enjoying the view, and he's throwing rocks, and he is at one with nature right now, and he trusts himself. So the choice that I made was step away, turn around. Don't watch it. Don't watch it if all it is bringing you stress and anxiety. He's got this. And guess what he did? He enjoyed it. He threw some rocks. He finished with that. He came away from the edge of the waterfall, and it was fine. But I know for myself, there was like a part of me that was like, if I interfere with this, I might actually make it worse than better.
Yeah.
If I come closer to the edge and I'm like, Matan, come back here, and I try to reach out for him, I might actually push him off the cliff,
Yeah.
you know? So it was definitely this moment of what's the responsible thing to do, though? You're the parent. It's dangerous, quote, quote, putting that into quotations. It's dangerous from my perspective because it's attached to all of the fears. But he's not afraid.
Yeah.
He's not afraid. He's enjoying himself. He sees the waterfall and he's throwing rocks and he's just in his element, you know?
Wow.
Yeah, I'm not saying that it isn't really difficult to be in that situation and to like really make the distinction of the fear because it's a lot. It was like, oh my gosh, I felt like, and then I was like, okay, Han, look at him. Look at him. What is he embodying right now? Can I attune with him and what he's experiencing and not project my experience onto him? And I saw a free kid who was just having a great time, who was unafraid, living his life, enjoying it. And I was like, I don't need to create something different than the experience that is present for him.
Wow. This story is reminding me of the other story of Matan with the ice skating that you told me recently.
Yeah.
I would love for you to share the story, but I'll explain why it's reminding me because of the self-trust in that story, like his ability to move into a trust. Would you share it with?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay.
So Matan, he's such a funny little dude. Anyways, so
How old is he again?
Matan is 5.
Okay, yeah.
He's 5 years old. 5 years old. I'm 5 years old. And we went ice skating for the first time just this past week. And I put on his ice skates. I tied them really tight. I brought him to the ice skating rink, and he immediately hugged the side of the wall, held on really, really tight. And he ever so slowly inched his way slowly, one tiny, tiny step in front of the other, and holding on so tight to the wall and taking his time to go all the way around the entire perimeter. And then he came off, he had a snack, and he went back on. And I stepped away to go talk to a friend. I was chatting with my friend because we were a bunch of friends with all of our kids together. I turn around, I come back to the rink, and Matan is in the middle of the rink ice skating. I'm like, what just happened? Literally a minute ago, he was hugging the wall so tightly, being so overly cautious about every step, so afraid to fall, literally so afraid. And then suddenly he's just like, skating in the middle of the rink. Anyway, he comes back off to have a snack. I'm like, what happened? What did you just do? He's like, well, I saw all of the big kids ice skating. And
You imitate him so well.
yeah, it's like I saw all the big kids ice skating. And so then I just closed my eyes and I imagined myself ice skating like they were ice skating. And then I opened my eyes and then I was able to ice skate.
Wow.
And I was like, whoa. The power of trusting your vision of yourself and also what I also appreciate so much is like recognizing that when I witness somebody else in something that they can do, in something that they're bringing into the universe that's possible, and I internalize that vision and I imagine myself in that way, I offer myself that possibility. And
Yeah.
that's what he did. He looked at what it is that he desired. And in that, he imagined it for himself. And by having that example in front of him, by
Yeah.
having that embodiment in front of him, it offered him what's possible inside of himself. And he imagined
Yeah.
that for himself and he gave it to himself in that. And literally, he ice skates now, which is so wild because he believed in himself, because he also recognized that the world has what to offer him,
Yeah.
something there. He said, I looked at the other people, I saw what's possible through them, and I took their example for myself. And I
Yeah.
took that to be able to create that for my own possibility.
Wow.
Yeah.
There's a few things that I'm hearing from this story, which is one, children as teachers and mirrors, and parents as teachers. It's a parallel process. And something that I sometimes say to parents that I work with, it's like healing in parenting, right? It's like the amount of healing that we receive and reflection about our own inner being, and the amount of humility, and the amount of courage, and the amount of self-forgiveness, and the amount of compassion that we can learn from the children of our generation. And in this case, Matan's a teacher to us, right? Because this is visualizing and then stepping in and being brave and having agency. But when we look at where he's coming from, which is, and where you're coming from, right? We're discussing this in a very holistic way. And this seems to be a generational theme that Matan looks and then he does. And when we see parents who see something and they say, "Oh, I wish I could do that when I get older, or
Mm,
when my kids get older," or I'm creative, but I'm not living my life for that now. I'm focusing on that. Or the only thing I can really focus on for the next 10 years is making money, and then I'll make my art, or then I'll make friends, or then I'll create more possibility for myself. What happens is that sometimes the children that we have are also more tentative because they don't only learn from the stories and what we say, they learn from attuning to our experience and their inner experience of us. And you are that. You speak and then you create. I was teaching my class last night that the words abracadabra come from the Hebrew words avra kedabra, which is I create as I speak.
yes.
And we were talking, you posted a story on Instagram last week about our podcast, and you were saying, I was inspired. And even though you were talking about us, but
Well,
you were
we inspire ourselves. I love it.
yeah. Yes. But you were saying how we've been in conversation every Wednesday for 2 years. And then we decided to start the podcast. And the next week we did. And it wasn't about perfection. And we decided to just make it 1% better each week. And we were just joking before this call that, like, about all the different professionalism things that we want to, really do, but we haven't fully done yet. And it's just, but we spoke and we created, we took our words and made them into actions. And you are a parent, but in general, as humans, we are the embodiments of what's possible for the children of our generation, whether you're listening and you're a parent or not. And you can inspire your friends' children. You can inspire the children that of the generation. You can inspire the children and the people around you that are even adults. And it's taking your dreams and making them into reality and visualizing ourselves into creating, desiring to create, and then acting on those desires. And we're here to be the possibility and giving you the permission to empower yourselves, to empower ourselves to bring what we desire to bring into the world. And it's like I'm ice skating and I'm walking around the rink and then I'm seeing other people doing the thing that I want to be doing. So then I go do it because there's so many people in the world who watch and they want and they want and they want, but they don't.
Hmm.
And if you're listening to this and if this is your moment, then I just want to say you can. You can if you choose to. You can if you desire, and your desire is your North Star. Hashem, God creates us with instinct, so that, and our instinct is the part of us that is Hashem, God speaking through us. It's the way Hashem speaks through us.
Yeah, I'm just remembering that the other day I had an inspiration that came over me and I went through an experience and I wanted to embody the experience, and the creative expression that I wanted to be was a bird woman. And my kids are alongside me in my process. So I was just talking about it at home. I was like, I have this vision. I want to embody this bird because this bird came to my window and whatever. I talked about the whole story. And
Wait,
then,
can we just give a little context? You are an
absolutely.
artist
Yes.
and you've created multiple art exhibits for others and for yourself, for your creativity to flow through. And you have done some incredible embodiment photo shoots of different experiences and stories that you've had over the years that are just beyond epic. And we'll talk about some of those in other podcasts, but I just want to give our audience a little context to what you're even talking about. Yeah.
Yes, thank you. I appreciate that. Yes, so I am an artist and I do really honor the creative urges and impulses that come through. And so this one vision came to me where I wanted to embody this bird woman, and I talked about it at home. I talk about most of my ideas out loud to my kids and to whoever is willing to listen, honestly.
Yeah.
And then the next morning, my daughter woke up, Eliora, who's also a very deep creative in similar ways to me. So she notices all the things and she's like, Mom, it's just so cool because yesterday you were talking about the idea of what you wanted, and then this morning I wake up and there's this whole costume hanging in the bathroom. It's so cool to know that whatever idea I'm thinking about, it's possible that it could just be real.
Mm,
It's really possible. It's like the same way Matan was able to notice these people and decide for himself it's possible because he sees the example of what that is. We are the example by leaning into the intuition that's coming through us in whatever way that is for you.
yeah.
And that is how we build the trust, because we build the trust by trusting the intuition and the instinct that's coming up inside of us and honoring that.
Yeah.
And I also want to say it's also honoring the fear that comes with that, because it's not always, it doesn't always mean that it comes and there isn't fear that's somewhat connected to it. It's doing it anyways. It's like the fear is here, it's also invited. It's also invited into this crazy idea that I have, that I just want to honor it and do it. And whatever comes in the path with that, cool. That's part of it. That comes with it.
Yeah. And also knowing that if you're listening to this and you're not necessarily an artist who has wild ideas that you want to create. I mean, I believe everybody's an artist in a different way, but not necessarily in this way. There might be other things that you desire, maybe a conversation that you desire to have, or maybe bringing more rest into your life, or maybe more intimacy with the people around you, or maybe planting something in your backyard, or maybe taking on a hobby, or eating in a more intentional manner that is self-loving to yourself, taking better care of yourself, whatever. It runs the gamut. But
Absolutely.
when we do the things that we really say we want to do, when we honor our own dreams, that is one of the prerequisites for raising empowered children, because children do not want to live out the unlived dreams of their parents. And children do not want to be extensions of their parents' unlived dreams and desires. Children want to have, and children deserve to have, their own lives and their own desires and their own dreams and their own hopes, and have their parents as inspiration, as opposed to living out the unlived hopes of somebody older than them. And sometimes I find when I work with my clients, they either feel like they have to live the unlived dreams of their parents or the unlived lives, or they feel in resistance to
Hmm.
living, and therefore they don't necessarily create or do more. So parents as teachers and children as teachers, I want to move into speaking about children as teachers a little bit more, and how much, and you are a parent, so I hand this over to you, but I know that you speak so highly of your children. You're endlessly inspired by your children. I've seen you be brought to tears by inspiration from your children many, many, many times. And you deeply, deeply learn the lessons that they teach you. And it takes a certain amount of humility and a certain amount of confidence to be that kind of parent. And there's the story that you shared about Eliora when she was a kid that I think our audience, which, yeah, love.
Yeah, it's actually interesting how many times Eliora is the one who's showing up here today. So just noticing that, and I really deeply appreciate her untethered energy and her willingness to be so stubborn in her needs being met in the way that really is in resonance with her and in honoring what's inside of her, because she really deeply teaches me that. And I've learned surrender in many ways. I learned surrender into my children's journey and mission, even from giving birth to Avi, my first son, who came 3 months early when we were on vacation in South Africa. And that's a long story, and we'll get back to that at another time. But like this idea that my children, that I do not control anything in this entire world. So that's number one. Number one, I learned that so deeply when I had a vision of what it was going to be like to have my first child, and then to be in a country really far away from home and go into labor early in a place that I did not know how things were going to work out, and give birth to a child. I really, in that process, understood how little control and what it really required for me, which was the most that I can give that time, was to surrender, because being anxious was not helping. Being out of sorts was not helping. And surrender was what actually got me through it in the most peaceful and the most grateful way, ultimately.
Yeah.
So I've definitely, from the first child arriving in this universe, they have already taught me that in the deepest, most embodied way possible. But I learned, they kept teaching it to me, because I think that it takes a long time to really come to a place of humility. And you will continue to learn that lesson as many times as you need to. And that your children will teach you that. At least my children have. And so I had this afternoon, I think Eliora was probably around between 2 and 3 years old. And she had a whole package of straws. And I was like, Eliora, I don't want all those straws on the floor. Please don't, because she was already kind of like she was gonna like throw them around. And I was like, no, dude, I'm not picking up 110 straws on the floor. Like, it's not happening. And I've made this like very firm decision that I am not picking up these straws in the side that I'm going to hold with my 3-year-old child, And guess what? Guess what? She's 3 years old and she doesn't care about the boundary that I have here, or the decision that I made on my end, this assertive decision that I will not pick up the straws and I will show you, child. Anyway, she sprinkled the straws everywhere, the whole floor, pink, blue, orange, yellow straws everywhere. And she doesn't care. And she's giddy and pushing, kicking the straws and making it the worst case scenario possible. And I was like, oh yeah, I'm going to show you. You think that you can get away with this? You're going to pick up the straws. And she's like, no, I'm not going to pick up the straws. I'm like, yes, you are. Yes, you are. And I remember in this almost like forceful way, because I was so determined to teach her who's boss, to show her who's in control of the situation here. I took her hand and I pulled it down to the floor so that she could pick up the straws. But guess what? I cannot make her grasp the straws. I can take her all the way down to the floor, but I cannot make her grasp those straws. So it doesn't matter that I think that I can make you do this. I cannot. And she taught me that so hard and so powerfully in that moment. I'm just going to be like this. I'm just going to have a limp hand. It doesn't matter how much you're telling me, you're going to do this. You're going to listen to me. I'm going to show you who's boss. No, you're not. You are not going to show me who's boss, because guess what? You're not in control. You're not in control. And that was such a humbling, deeply humbling experience, to come to understand that I cannot make you grasp it. I can't. There's no possible way. And believe me, it was a hard one to learn in that moment because I
Who
was,
picked up the straws?
oh yeah. And then I, in my deepest humility and possible disgrace of myself in some ways too, I picked up every damn straw off of the
Yeah.
floor and probably mumbled under my breath at that time. But in retrospect, it was one of the most powerful understandings and embodied experience of understanding that control is an illusion. It is
Yeah.
an absolute illusion. And
She
surrender is
picked up the
literally the only
straws.
way.
Yeah.
Yes.
She picked up the straws in her bruised ego.
Absolutely. And also the humility of the concept that a 3-year-old can bruise your ego, because
Yeah.
that's what I was holding at that time.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, unbelievable.
What
Unbelievable.
a great story. There's
Yes.
so much more to talk about, but I want to actually end us off because I think we're coming at time.
Yes.
Does that
Yeah.
sound good?
Yeah.
Okay. So I'd like to end off with just talking a little bit about emotional regulation. We learn so many things in school as children, math and science and history, and in Jewish schools, a lot of different Torah studies. And there's very little learning about emotional regulation. And there's many adults that come to me that are developmentally in their emotional hygiene and their emotional wisdom and their emotional knowledge very, very young, learning to feel two feelings at once, learning about projections, learning about taking deep breaths, learning about grounding ourselves, learning about feeling our feelings, etc., etc., etc. And empowering ourselves with learning emotional regulation, however old we are, empowers our children to then be free to learn their own. First, we can regulate with them, co-regulate with them, and then they can learn self-regulation. Because a child can only learn to regulate themselves if they are co-regulated with. If they have a regulated adult who teaches them regulation through the resonance field, through attuning to them and with them. So learning emotional regulation tools and learning how to manage our own inner world and learning how to attune to our inner experience, to our very real feelings, also helps us raise and cultivate empowered children in this generation.
I think that what we can offer our audience and walk away with today in relationship to attuning and regulating is this. The process of unraveling everything inside of us will take the time that it does. That's okay. But what we can offer our children today in this moment is validating the feeling that is present right now. So if my kid says, I feel scared, I can tell them, it's okay to feel scared. If my kid tells me, I'm feeling so excited about this, wow, that's so great that you're feeling so excited. To mirror the feeling that they are experiencing back to them and to give them the self trust that what they're feeling is okay. It's okay to feel the feeling that you are experiencing. And if you notice in yourself that something comes up inside of that, that's your guiding light to be curious about why that might not be okay for you as the adult.
Yeah.
But right now, separate from that, it's an actionable. It's what we can do to practice right now, detached from everything else that's inside of us, because we'll get to that. We'll get to the evolve of our own psyche and our own regulation and all of that. But what we can offer our children today is that if I tell you I'm feeling so sad because that boy made fun of me, it's okay to feel so sad. It's okay to feel so sad. And you know what? Sometimes I feel sad too.
Yeah. Mic drop. Yeah. I mean, I think that giving our audience, especially as a seasoned parent that you are, giving our audience a actionable step to walk away with is so helpful, and understanding that we can also take that. I can't help but say that understanding that we can also take what Khani just shared back to ourselves and to the
Absolutely.
child inside of us. And when we feel something, we can tell ourselves, it's okay to feel sad. It's okay to feel like I'm losing control. It's okay to feel afraid for my child's well being. It's okay because when we can allow ourselves to feel the feeling, we can allow it to flow through us instead of getting trapped in some kind of behavior or some kind of ruminating thought or some kind of pervasive fear. And with that, I think we're going to close out for today.
Yeah,
Thanks,
thanks so
honey.
much for being here. Thanks so much for listening. Possibly in the universe is here with you, with your listens, with your remarks, with your feedback, with your guiding lights in your direction. And we love and appreciate you all so much. Thanks so
Yeah,
much.
so fun. Okay, bye.
Yay. Bye. Till next time.
The Possibility of the Universe podcast is only possible because of you, our audience. Thank you so much for being here with us.
Thanks so much for being here, and thanks so much for listening. I'm Chani. First and foremost, I am a believer. I am a wife. I am a mother of 6 beautiful children. I am the co-owner of Mimulo, luxury florist and event production company. I am a life coach working with both individuals and couples to empower them to step into their own possibilities in this universe.
Hi, I'm Rivky, and I love life. I love heart-centered living. I love to be curious, and I love to connect with all things. I started off as a social worker and developmental therapist, and now I work as a somatic and subconscious practitioner using modalities such as somatic healing, breathwork, bodywork, hypnotherapy, and some really magical and incredible quantum healing technologies. I work with individuals, couples, run retreats and courses using these modalities to help people find the most freedom, presence, aliveness, and embodiment inside of their lives. The ways to contact us are through my website, rivkygross.com. That is spelled RIVKY dash, the straight line dash, gross, GROSS.com. You can also follow us on Instagram, Chani at Muckhome Sanctuary, and myself at Rivky Gross. We are here for any and all questions and feedback through the contact form on the website, and we're so looking forward to hearing from you.